The reading for today is from the Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote this: "Do not disturb yourself by thinking of the whole of your life. Let not your thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which you may expect to befall you, but on every occasion ask yourself, what is there in this which is intolerable and past bearing? For you will be ashamed to confess any such thing. In the next place, remember that neither the future nor the past pains you, but only the present. But this is reduced to a very little if you only circumscribe it and chide your mind, saying, if it is unable to hold out even against this, what does it do?" A saying that cropped up all the time when I was a kid was some version of, "The Lord will never give you more than you can bear." Or in my dialect, "The Lord won't put nothing on you that you can't carry." Well, like other sayings, cleanliness is next to godliness, or pride goeth before a fall, or God helps those who help themselves. Well, none of those sayings are actually in scriptures. The verse that comes closest to that sentiment, "the Lord will never give you more than you can bear," occurs in Hebrew scriptures in Isaiah. "When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee." Now, like that taking up serpents thing, that is metaphor. It's not suggesting that the faithful should go out and walk through rivers or through fire. So it is that the desire that a reassurance exists in Scripture leads to the invention of a phrase because it ought to be there even if it's not. Now, I belong to a multi-faith clergy group in downtown Minneapolis, and we plan multi-faith services of various sorts, and my clergy friends always have a good laugh ribbing the humanists that my scripture is probably going to be some contemporary poetry. And why do I do that? Well, I mean, one, because I'm a humanist and I can, but two, because often contemporary poetry does contain those things that scripture we only wish did. The contemporary poet Jane Hirshfield, in a poem called "The Weighing," writes this: "So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks for more, and we give it." Jane Hirshfield's reassurance isn't, all that reassuring, but it's considerably better than planning on walking through rivers or fires or taking up serpents. In Hirshfield's view of reality, there's one more straw, and then one more straw, and guess what? The camel's back does not break. We are always able to do that next thing. And of course, that idea rhymes with Marcus Aurelius's view in the reading this morning. "Do not disturb yourself by thinking of the whole of your life. Let not your thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which might befall you." Think about just what's happening right now, Marcus Aurelius says. And Hirshfield and Marcus Aurelius agree. When we look at the challenge that is immediately before us, we can generally meet that challenge. We can go on and we can make it. Our theme for the month of May is thresholds. And a couple of Sundays ago, I talked about the fear of the spaces between, those liminal spaces where it isn't clear where to go next. And, those spaces have frightened people through the ages. In the Western world, people wear black to funerals because of an ancient belief that the souls of the dead are confused about where to go after death, and they might just follow you home from the graveyard if you don't wear black, and so they can't see you. There are several explanations concerning the origin of that tradition of husbands carrying new wives over a threshold. But one tradition sees the practice as a ritualistic removal of the wife from the grounding of her family bringing her into a new home and into a new family and way of being. Yes, thresholds are scary places, be they about the newly dead or the newlywed. We always wonder what's going to happen next. And so we've got astrologers and soothsayers and fortune tellers. We've got tarot cards and tea leaves, and we read the intestines of animals, and we've got the I Ching. They all are there to explain what happens next. Now, the use of astrology has skyrocketed since the intervention of COVID-19, despite the fact that the astrologers didn't predict that event. Oops. Bibliomancy is the practice of opening a Bible randomly to a verse, and that verse will somehow explain your question. And Alexander the Great used bibliomancy to make decisions before battles. He would open Homer's Iliad to random places that would give him the answer. The words divine and divination have a common root. Divination is a method for discovering the secrets of the divine and thus uncovering the mind of the divine in the future. The discovery doesn't have to be supernatural, however. In the rural South, we have water diviners or water dowsers or water witches, as we call them. Now, in the neighborhood where I grew up around my family farm, we had a seventh son of a seventh son who was indeed a water witch. And he used a kind of wood called witch hazel, which is supposed to seek out water sources. And I watched him work when I was a kid. For $20, he would come over to your farm. He would go to the nearest woods and cut a Y-shaped branch, then carefully trim it down, and then start walking slowly to find water. And yes, when I was a kid anyway, I saw the stick pointing down where water was. Divining is still done nowadays, but most diviners these days use two bent steel rods and they put it in the mouth of a glass jar. When the two rods cross, there's the water. We have those kinds of superstitions because we want to know where do we dig so we don't have to work so hard. We want to know what happens next. The Roman god Janus was the god of doorways and thresholds, and Janus had two faces, one going forward, one looking backward. And of course, the month of January is named in his honor. And Janus in Roman days was invoked at the beginning and the ends of rituals to open up the spirit world and then to close it back down again. Papa Legba serves the same function in Voodoo, popularly known as voodoo. And in Christian scriptures, the angels announce the birth of Jesus passing from the heavenly realm into the mundane human world. All thresholds and gateways. We human beings naturally want what is hidden to be uncovered. All of us desperately want to know what is going to happen next so we can be prepared. But what about those of us who believe in logic and reason as the best ways to uncover the hidden and to think about the future? The Greek philosopher Aristotle did quite a bit of thinking about thinking, and he had specific advice concerning making decisions about the future and the unknown in a logical manner. Aristotle advised that we do well to begin with the consideration of virtue. What is the virtue that we are aiming at in our plans? And he called that the telos, the end of our actions. Now, after we know what the telos is, the virtue that we are after, then we can start considering frames around reality. And those frames come from human history and from the experience of others in others' times. And those of you who have been listening to me for the past few weeks know that I have been trying to frame the things that are happening by looking at the 1918 flu and the First World War and the Great Depression and the Second World War and 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis. What happened to the community? What happened to First Unitarian Society when those disjunctive events occurred? It helps us frame what will happen next. In your annual report for this year, I have included a short excerpt from a pamphlet called Humanism for Today. It was a membership pamphlet from the year 1938. And I think it offers a frame for us to consider today. In the year 1938, the U.S. was slowly and painfully working its way out of the Great Depression. Economic gains reversed that year, industrial output dropped back again, and unemployment went back up to 19%. And by the way, the unemployment rate of today is 14.7%. In 1938, the Empire of Japan was consolidating its conquest of China, having murdered over 300,000 Chinese citizens. Mussolini's fascist Italy occupied North Africa. The Nazi Germany was at the height of its power. In March of 1938, Hitler seized control of Austria, and then about the same time as our annual meeting in May of 1938, Hitler declared his intentions to invade Czechoslovakia. Meanwhile, the membership committee of First Unitarian Society printed a pamphlet called Humanism for Today, and they wrote these words: "All people in the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis are expected to do their own thinking on religion. It does not ask or expect or even wish its members to assent to any certain beliefs. It imposes not the slenderest creedal obligations, neither expressed nor implied. Just as a university needs no creed and yet arms students with knowledge and convictions and creative faith, so does this creedless congregation strive to incite its people to think out their life philosophies, to achieve convictions, to become animated with faith, ideals, and visions." To think out their life philosophies, to achieve convictions, to become animated with faith, ideals, vision. Heady aspirations in a very dark time, upholding the ideals of free thought and human freedom in the very midst of darkness and chaos. But what else could our humanist forebears do in 1938? They knew that no gods were going to stop economic catastrophe and wholesale starvation in the United States. They knew that no gods were going to intervene in the Dust Bowl ravaging the southern Great Plains at the time. They knew that no gods were going to stop the Wehrmacht. No gods were going to stop the fascist invasion of Africa. No gods were going to stop the wholesale slaughter of civilians in China. No gods were going to make the U.S. a free and just society. Only collective human action was going to ameliorate the suffering of the world. That's a frame for us to consider. Aspirations, the readiness to pitch in for the greater good, always keeping that telos, that virtue in mind. All people must be free. We must resist the easy impulses toward oppression and theocracy and greed. For the annual meeting of May 1938, things looked bad, and it was going to get worse. Worldwide, 350 million people were about to die violent deaths. One of the most valid measures of a human being or of an institution is resilience under extreme stress. We are resilient because we keep our eyes on our aspirations. We frame the chaos of the moment, and then we consider the alternatives that are open to us. This year, the 138th year of First Unitarian Society, has been a challenge, and we have met that challenge, and we have grown from that experience. Through the necessity of electronic assemblies, we have reconnected with people far from our walls, and we have offered the opportunity to see how we think out our life philosophies, how we live into our convictions and become animated with faith, ideals, and vision, just as our humanist forebears did back in 1938. Free people in a free religious tradition. Fact is, more volunteers have stepped up doing those things that we are trying to do in our congregation than ever before. You have stepped up to this new challenge. What is the end we as a congregation are pursuing? What's the telos? Congregations, like individuals, must be self-reflective. We want to do the right thing for the right reasons. And our current mission statement says just what our telos is. FUS Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is a congregational humanist community dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. We are a congregational humanist community dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. That's the telos of our congregation. We are the foundation and the beacon of congregational humanism. We are a safe place to share dangerous ideas. We believe not in the voice of fear and authoritarianism, but in reason and in the din of conversation that is a democracy. So, no, the challenge isn't over, but we will carry on and we will grow from that challenge. Our generation will meet the challenges just as past generations have done with their challenges. We keep our telos, our aspirations in sight. We frame the chaos. We consider the alternatives, all the while knowing that there are few black and white issues. The color of reality is usually gray, and we must sometimes choose between competing goods, and sometimes we have to choose between competing bads. We contextualize, we look at alternatives, we choose the best options even when there are no good ones. We believe in implementing our decisions and following through. Yeah, there's work to be done. People are still searching for community and freedom of thought even today. As a state and as a nation, we need to elect competent leaders right now. We need to fight systemic oppression and systemic poverty. The question is how we personally and as a congregation deal with this current disaster. Do we choose magical thinking and succumb to the fear that leads to anger and scapegoating? Or do we cling to the hope that leads to compassion and healing? The great danger of institutions is that they become reason engines and logic machines, and they become virtueless bureaucracies only out to take care of themselves. And compassionate individuals have no place in such pitiless scripts. We have watched our nation do just that kind of institutionalization. But we keep our eyes on the telos, freedom of thought, democracy. We are a congregational humanist community dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. We see historical wrongs and we see systemic wrongs, and we join together and do what we can. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks more, and we give it. If you will repeat with me, please, our extinguishing. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at FUS Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at fusunitarian.org.